Good morning to all of you. Last Friday, we covered statement 12 of chapter 1. The statement on mistaken relative truth. And particularly, I think the one point also made in the footnote here in this book says that often when Jiten Sumgen is talking about relative truth, then he is most focused on the issue of karmic causality. That karmic causality, when you come across things like relative truth that are mistaken and relative truth that is unmistaken, then relative truth that is mistaken is to live in such a way and to understand things in such a way that ignores or perverts the principle of karmic causality. That will be mistaken relative truth. Relative truth that is without mistakes is the clear understanding, and therefore, conducting our lives that is in accord with the principle of karmic causality. And since it is, you could say, innate to all of us to want happiness and not to want suffering, then if we really understand the principle of karmic causality, then we would then become more and more careful and more naturally go in the direction of conducting our lives in accord with this principle of karmic causality, and in particular to give up the causes of suffering and to engage in the causes of happiness. To give up the causes of suffering, even though initially you might give up the causes of suffering but rather you have to do it, even though at the beginning maybe you have to do it in the context of like, I have this vow, I have this, make this promise not to do this, not to do that, and therefore now I'm not going to do it. Even though at the beginning it's in that form, but really the more reliable way of giving up the causes of suffering is to really see causes of suffering as causes of suffering. It's because we don't see the causes of suffering as the causes of suffering, and instead, mistakenly, sometimes we think the causes of suffering is the causes of happiness, and that's why we go back to creating the causes of suffering. Often, when we're creating causes of suffering, we don't recognize that they are causes of suffering, right? We somehow think, this must be how I achieve my goals. I achieve the happiness that I'm looking for. And then you engage in them, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I think, this is a cause of suffering, not a cause for happiness, not a cause of what I was looking for, but because of habits, right? Karmic habits. So anyway, that is statement 12. Statement 13, let me read the statement. If you have the book, this is all starting on page 79. So statement 13 says, all the paths progress through the 10 stages. All the paths progress through the 10 stages. So paths here, of course, in Buddhist thought, paths mean methods, ways to become awake. So Khenpo Kunpal's commentary, all the paths of sutra and mantra have the same point. They are congruent in leading to the attainment of omniscience by progressing from the first stage up to the 10th stage. However, there are different training abilities according to skillful means and diligence, which cause one to be fast or inclined towards sudden or gradual attainment when traversing the path. Again, all the paths of sutra and mantra have the same point. They are congruent in leading to the attainment of all-knowingness by progressing from the first stage up to the 10th stage. However, there are different training abilities according to skillful means and diligence, which cause one to be quick or fast, therefore inclined towards the so-called sudden or gradual attainment. Yeah. So here basically says, whether it's the path of sutra or the path of mantra, and again, in the context of Kyopa in the 12th century and even up till now, there are these questions and debates about, what is the difference between the sutra path and the mantra path? Oh, some say, oh, sutra path is like this, mantra path is like this. And always what's, it implies here, and always, the discussions will be how mantra, in what ways mantra, the path of mantra, is superior to the path of sutra. The path of mantra is not talking about mantra recitation, okay? Mantra recitation is just a very small piece, a very small element actually of the path of mantra, the path of secret mantra, right? In other words, Vajrayana. So in many of these discussions and debates, often people are trying to show how the path of mantra is superior to the path of sutra. And because discussions of stages of attainment, all those discussions or teachings that the Buddha gave on the stages of attainment tend to appear in sutra material. Therefore, some people, have this opinion or this idea that whereas in the sutra tradition, in the sutra approach, the sutra path, there are all these stages that you have to go through. Somehow in the mantra path, you don't need these stages. Yeah, you don't need these stages. So, because the discussion of stages are found in sutra material, such as there is a sutra that's called Dasha Bhumika, which means the 10 stages sutra. Dasha Bhumika Sutra, the 10 bhumis. Stages is the Sanskrit bhumi, which means levels. The 10 bodhisattva bhumis. So there's a sutra called the 10 bhumis, Dasha Bhumika Sutra. There in details, the 10 stages are taught. So a lot of people look at that and say, oh, that belongs to sutra. Whereas in mantra, no need the 10 stages. But Jigten Sungön's view is that no. Whether we're talking about sutra path or mantra path, those stages are there. Those same stages we have to go through. It's not as if, if you go the mantra route, you don't go through the stages. And here, as Khenpo Kunpal points out, where the difference is in terms of how diligent and how able the trainees are, how diligent, meaning just persistence, how strong your persistence is, how diligent you are, one element, he says. Second element, how capable you are in using the special methods that are taught in mantra in order to slowly or quickly take you from one stage to the next stage to the next stage to the next stage. And so Khenpo Kunpal here, explains that what Jigten Sumgön is saying is not, is saying what Jigten Sumgön is saying is, it is not as if what is sudden about the sudden path, meaning mantra, is speed, not not needing to go through the stages, but rather how quickly, through skill and through persistence, one could go through the stages fast or slow. And so that's statement 13. Then to elaborate on that, statement 14 is closely related. I'll read statement 14. Furthermore, it is certain that one engages in the paths gradually. So here it makes it even more clear that all these stages you go through gradually. Gradual, this, at least the word in English, might sound like it is about speed, but it's not about, what's emphasized here when it says gradually is not about speed. What it's talking about is, it is talking about sequentially. So here, the commentary. Furthermore, even if one traverses the paths in one moment, meaning instantaneously, it is certain that one only engages in the paths gradually. For example, if a strong person pierces a needle through a stack of many piled lotus petals, it looks like, and we can say, that he pierces them simultaneously. However, he pierces them gradually because he cannot pierce the ones below without piercing the ones above first. And the other example that I've used is the shooting of an arrow onto a target. And the target consists of many layers of cloth, right? And so even you can say, oh, the target, the arrow hit the target in one instance, right? We sometimes say things like that, in one split of a second, right? The arrow hit the target. But that's only because, right? Relative to our speed of doing things and relative to the arrow piercing the target, relative to our normal speed of doing things, that's like one moment, right? But then if you compare the speed of that arrow, right, traveling and piercing the target, to say the speed of the spacecraft, traveling through space, it's very slow. It's very slow. So here, Kyopa says, As far as the process goes, it's the same process of unmasking, shedding the levels and layers of confusion. But due to how persistent you are, how hardworking you are, and how much skill you have in handling this, then you can do it slowly or quickly. Now, interestingly, having said that, right? So statement 14, might make you think, oh, according to Kyopa, it's always step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6. That it's always like that. Yeah? I mean, it sounds like that, right? When he insists like it all happens always in stages, and the difference is whether it's quick or slow. 15 adds some nuance to our understanding. What does 15 say? 15 says, there are also some who first abandon the cognitive obscurations. First, there are also some who abandon the cognitive obscurations first. So to appreciate this particular statement, statement 15, know that generally speaking, we say, especially in the Mahayana system, we say that sentient beings are obscured by two types of obscurations. That insofar as obscurations, that which obscures our Buddha nature, there are two types. One type is called emotive obscuration, and the other is called cognitive obscurations. Emotive obscurations came about, is the result of having mistaken ideas about the persons of, having mistaken ideas, mistaken beliefs about the self of persons. Cognitive obscurations is the result of having mistaken wrong beliefs and ideas, deeply held ideas with regards to the self of phenomena. Then, generally speaking, you first purify the coarser of the two, which is the emotive obscurations, and then you purify the cognitive, the more subtle of the two, which is the one related to thinking, feeling, believing that dharmas, phenomena, have selves. First, you get rid of, so to say, you cut through the core sense of self, which is based on I have a self. Then when you have removed that, you can work on a deeper level, which is, even though you don't think I have a self, you think somehow the basic building blocks of this, like the element of hardness, that which provides solidity to this body, that which provides fluidity, mobility to this body, or heat to this body, that those basic building blocks, maybe they have self, they have permanence. That's a more subtle one that needs to be removed. But here, if you go back to statement 14, which is saying, how awakening always happens in a way that is according to a sequence, a particular order. 15 says, well, there are also some where first the more subtle obscurations is cleared, and then the grosser obscurations are cleared. So let's see Khenpo Kunpal's commentary. It says, According to the particularities of the person, the karmic, afflictive, and cognitive obscurations are gradually abandoned. So here, the vocabulary is, in fact, talks about three types of obscurations. Karmic and afflictive. Afflictive is the one I call emotive. So karmic and afflictive, those usually are one, put together as one, or in some contexts, put together as one, the grosser one, and then the cognitive obscurations. Karmic then here, if you divide the first into two, into karmic and afflictive, karmic I would say would be more when that suffering, that obscuration of suffering itself, when suffering is going on, it obscures. Then the afflictive is the origins of the suffering. According to the particularities of the person, the karmic, afflictive, and cognitive obscurations are gradually abandoned. And there are also some who first abandon the cognitive obscurations. Then the other two automatically get abandoned along with them. This is maintained according to Milarepa's words. Milarepa taught that this is also another way to do it. So in the commentary, in the footnotes, the translator tells us that some quote-unquote first abandon the cognitive obscurations means that they mainly practice the antidotes to these. And then the other obscurations get automatically purified along the way. And so what it's saying here is that it is also possible, again, for some special individuals who have the right conditions, and the right conditions don't fall from the sky. The right conditions are conditions that we have put together, whether recently or over time, right? We have put those conditions together. So it goes back to the issue of great ability and great persistence. If you are at a point where you have great persistence and you have great ability, and again, great persistence and great ability didn't just fall out from the sky, didn't accidentally hit you. These are things that you have cultivated in previous lifetimes, or even earlier in this lifetime. You have developed to such a point that here you can more directly focus on the antidotes, the methods, the cure for the cognitive obscurations. So this is talking about, there are some who can effectively meditate on mind, nature of mind, and therefore is working on the problem, so to say, in a more direct way. So they don't, at least in this lifetime, it doesn't seem like they spend a lot of time working on like the more basic things. It doesn't seem like. But here, we need to understand that when it says doesn't seem like, they're working, they're spending so much time on the more basic things, again, we should not think that, without rhyme or reason, right? That's how they got here. Actually, no. We would say, well, because in the past, you need to understand is that they have already brought these conditions together. And so in a different context, one example given is, some people, it seems like, they just arrived, so to say, right? They just started these practices. They just got exposed to these teachings, but somehow very quickly, their obscurations are cleared. So to explain that, one example given before in other contexts is like it's like if there is a big boulder, a big rock, and it will take like a strong person with a very strong hammer to hit the rock. Like it requires 20 hittings before the rock will break apart, right? So you see someone come by and hit it once, hit it twice, nothing seems to be going on. But a very strong person, can hit it a third time and it breaks. But that's because of the strength of this person. In terms of the breaking, it's still right the same principle that is involved in the breaking. It's not like the strong person is able to break that rock without the rock undergoing the same conditions that is necessary for its breaking down. So here, right, statement 13 and 14 and 15, when you take that together, then you understand that, so it's not that Kyopa is being like, how do you say? It's not that Kyopa is insisting, like, oh, you have to follow all the rules. It might sometimes sound like that, all the stages, have to be cultivated accordingly. So immediately, sometimes people think, he's just a very conservative kind. He's emphasizing everything have to be in sequence. We're not necessarily talking about this here. A more subtle point, I feel, is that he's saying, the conditions for undermining our obsession with samsara, the conditions for overturning samsara, whether it's a person with a lot of strength, skill, and persistence, or a person with less strength, less persistence, less skill, the conditions for the undermining of samsara remains the same. So how soon can you bring about these conditions, and how effectively you're using these conditions? Therein lies the difference. So here the take-home lesson is like, don't rely on what I've called magic thinking. Don't think that, if I find, that super method, if I find the super guru, if I find, the super sadhana, the super guru, the super method, the super empowerment, the super view, the super book, somehow, right, magic will just happen. If it looks like magic, if it feels like magic, it is simply that you are not able to see clearly the causes and the conditions. But nonetheless, for overturning the confusion of samsara, that overturning, that dispelling of suffering, the same conditions are there, need to be there. Whether fast or slow, strong or weak, lazy or dedicated. Same conditions. Any questions, comments? Make sense? No? The next two statements are about this issue of like logic related to the study of logic. But once again, you'll see how Kyopa, he's not so interested in the formal systems of like, debate and logic. He does emphasize the importance of reasoning, like I would say all Buddhist traditions, emphasize the importance of using reasoning. But then from there, and from there and for other reasons, Indian Buddhism developed a very formal logic system and debate system. And so then Tibetans also inherited that and learned that. But Kyopa is going to use some of these systems or some of these expressions and vocabulary of logic and pull us away from kind of over intellectualizing or getting into all these debates and seeing how the real meaning of using reasoning is about overcoming our own confusions. 16, 17, 18 and 19, those verses have to do with so continuing from that direction, in terms of logic, in terms of reasoning, then it takes us to the issue of views. And what are these views? Again, these views, it began with simply the Buddha saying, how we view things, how we understand things, determines how we live in the world. But then from that core, over time, Buddhist traditions develop into, again, formal philosophical positions and systems. Again, you'll see how Kyopa wants to take this back to our practice, our experience. So those are 18, 19. So today, we are going to end here.